This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. My guest today is LAFFERTY. Bree, I'm so glad to have you here.
And I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, you're so welcome. What I love about your story is it's really so unique and it's so detailed. And, as I hear stories like yours, I realize that there's just still so much more to learn about the afterlife. And we're just getting little puzzle pieces with everyone that we listen to. And so yours is really special. And I want to get right into it. I know you had a chronic illness leading up to your near-death experience, but maybe just very briefly touch on that and then lead us right on into your NDE.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had 16 years of a rare chronic neurological movement disorder leading up to my near-death experience. And I think that had a big role to play in what happened. I ended up becoming very, very ill from a different type of treatment. Once again, it's very rare. The doctors didn't know how to treat it. They tried everything they could with conventional medicine, so we stepped outside of that. Well, in this treatment, I got ill as well with flu-like symptoms. And I couldn't keep anything down, and I was just very exhausted. This went on for weeks. And the few days leading up to it, I couldn't sleep. I refused to go to the doctor because they had never helped me. So why go after 16 years? And I was just going to power through it. Well, come April 27th, 2017, it came to a head. And at 2 a.m, my mom and I had been on the phone off and on. I was in a different state at the time, and just kind of in different types of prayer and affirmations and trying to get me through this. And I hung up the phone. I told her I needed to get some sleep, because if I told her she needed to get some sleep, she would stay on the phone. I knew I was not going to sleep. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew it wasn't sleep. So I hang up the phone and I am exhausted. I am mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually exhausted. I'd been dealing with this chronic illness for 16 years, then this flu-like illness for 3 weeks, getting worse and worse. I hadn't had any help from the medical industry. My church kind of abandoned me at a young age. They didn't know how to help either. I had been angry with the God that I was taught in church. So at this point, I just give up, and I say in my mind, I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands. And I meant it. I meant it with absolutely everything. I could no longer fight. And with that, within an instant, it was like the weight of 100 boulders was removed. The screams of 1,000 concerts had been silenced. Thorns from hundreds of whips had been stopped and paused. And for once in my life, the first time in my life, I felt complete peace and serenity. Everything was quiet. Everything was calm. There was no pain. There was no noise. It was wonderful. And I started feeling tapping on the palms of my hands and my feet. And after that, there was this big booming voice. I describe it masculine, but I can't describe where it came from. It was ethereal, hard to describe, and it asked, "Are you ready?" I didn't hesitate to even question what that meant. I knew that something had answered my cry, my prayer, my desperation. So of course I was going to say yes. And as soon as I thought yes, I felt 3 hard pounds on my chest, and I was completely detached from my body. I knew nothing of this physical Bree. I knew nothing of the physical earth. I was in darkness, but it wasn't the type of darkness we experience here on earth. Even if you've been in a cave where they shut off all the lights and it is complete darkness, it was very different. It was fuzzy and embracing. It was even though there was no temperature, it was the emotion of warmth. It was pure love. And in this darkness, even though I didn't see anything, I saw the energy of the creator, the being that answered me and had rescued me. And I had this weird thought, even though I didn't know of my human life or earth, I had the thought, am I dead? And within that thought, these three monks appeared and they floated by with shit-eating grins as if to, kind of laugh. And they didn't say anything. They just gave me shit-eating grins like, if you only knew. It would take me 5+ years to understand that they kind of laughed because there is no such thing as death. There is no such thing as dead. So, of course, it was a funny question. It was a funny thought because it didn't exist. Death is only a transition of energy. So, as they disappear back into the darkness, I end up in this amazing, bright, vivid blue tunnel filled with ones and zeros. I'm going through it what feels like supersonic speed. I'm still just an energy body at this point, and I understand my consciousness is being downloaded with information. And these numbers are going past me. I'm going past the numbers. It's bright, it's blue, it's amazing, and it's the knowledge of the world, the knowledge of the universe. And I wasn't sure of what that knowledge was at the time, but I knew it was important and it would come to me when I needed it. And after this amazing warp speed tunnel, I end up in a white space. I used to call it a room, but that's not very fitting because there was no walls or windows or doors or ceilings. There was kind of a floor though. And on this floor in front of me was this pile of huge black numbers. And behind me was the energy of a ascended master teacher. So I didn't get a feeling of who specifically, if there was a specific one, just that it was an ascended master. So I grew up with religious teachings of Jesus, so I would compare him to Jesus. But I also understand that these ascended masters and this energy could also be in other religions, such as Krishna, Muhammad, Buddha. There's tons of ascended teachers and masters. So this energy was the embodiment of that. And in front of me, back to these numbers, I pick them up and I throw them in the air with childlike enthusiasm, as if I said, no wonder you love creating, because I realized that the universe was created in math. And it was so exciting to hold this knowledge in front of me. It's like so much fun. And at this point, I had more of a human-like form. And that was the only time in my experience that I resembled a human at all. But I did so with this childlike enthusiasm. And it was just such a great feeling of joy. And after this space, I end up in another area. I don't know how to describe these spaces yet. But it was kind of like a town or, a separate place. And in this town, it was filled with even more curiosity and joy and just experimenting. And your thoughts became instant reality. And I'll go into what I mean. So in front of me, I see these beings sliding down these huge trees, and the trees are covered in snow. And I just have the thought, I don't think I like snow. Instantly, it turns to lush green trees. And there I am sliding down these lush green trees like this little Tarzan, just having so much fun sliding through the forest. And I look over and I see other beings sliding down these trees with me. And I get the thought, what if they like snow and they're actually experiencing snow, but because I don't like snow, and this is also my experience, I see them sliding down green, but they may be seeing themselves sliding down snow. So we're experiencing these different realities simultaneously together. But it wasn't, this kind of crazy circulation like it sounds like here in our human form, because it was just curious. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. I put no thought or stock into it, just interesting, because it's just pure curiosity. And I didn't question the physics of that, or the possibility. It was just, oh, matter of fact. And so that was one of the very first cool experiences in this space. I also worked together with other beings in this store-like area, stocking shelves in what was like a grocery store. And then on the other side of the grocery store was this beautiful giant stage, and we all entered into dancing together as if we had choreographed for millennia, all while no one said a word. We just moved together in oneness. It was absolutely delightful. And I want to clarify, when I say beings, I say that because I, once again, wasn't familiar with the idea of being human. And second, I didn't know if these souls had come from the same place I had, even though I didn't know I had come from anywhere. I just, in looking back, we weren't in human-like bodies. We're oftentimes in a doll-like body. So I have no idea where these beings actually started from. So moving on further into this area of my experience, and there are some beings working on a machine. And this machine has a giant flame coming out the top of it as these beings work on it. And even though I don't like snow, or I had the thought I didn't like snow, I turned into a snowman. Ironic, right? Afterlife has a sense of humor, I think. And I just have the thought, well, what happens if I get too close to that flame? Will I melt? Well, as soon as you have a thought, it turned into reality. And so there I was, too close to the flame, and I melted. So I'm this puddle of eyes, and I'm just kind of looking, and I have the thought, will they put me back together? Just as soon as the thought happened, they put me back together. And another fun body I had in this experience, I had, I think, 3, was robotic. I was this robot trying to fly, and I was terrible at it. But there's no fear, there's no pain, there's, none of these lower vibrational energies, just pure curiosity and joy. And so I'm trying to fly, and I end up severing my arm on a pole. No pain, just curious, like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen. Then I see it grow back with binary code, the same binary code from my tunnel. And I was just very, whoa, that's curious, and just cool. It was very just matter of fact once again. The last part of this place I was in, I ended up actually speaking the first part of this experience in this area where actual words were exchanged. I was with this older gentleman. He had a long beard sitting in the corner of this very odd building. So one side was bricks, and I couldn't see what was beyond the door, even though it wasn't a real door. It was just a hollowed out part in the wall. And on the other part, it was kind of like what you see in a garden house, a greenhouse, where it's just glass and it's kind of hexagonal on one side. It would be a full hexagon or octagon had it been full, but it was only half protruding out of this building. And we sat in there, and he sat while I laid down, and I know he shared amazing wisdom, and I'm sure that one day it'll come to me, but that is one part of my experience that I can absolutely not recall. Actual words were spoken, and I was with him for quite a while. I don't share this part often because I still can't make sense of it, but I am very excited to understand or receive that information when it makes itself known. So after I leave this room with this gentleman, all the beings are kind of lining up around a barbed wire fence. And you usually can see beyond a barbed wire fence, but in this place, it was kind of blurry or fuzzy. You couldn't see beyond it. And there was an opening in the fence, and some of the beings were walking through it and crossing over on a land bridge into this blurry realm. And I wasn't asked if I wanted to go. I didn't try to follow. I just knew that I couldn't go with them. And there was no emotion attached to it. Just, oh, okay. Matter of fact, can't go with them. And then I end up in the last phase of my experience in what did feel like a room, very small, with 7 amazing, incredible, high, powerful beings. And I don't know if they're archangels or 7 beings of light. I've been trying to research who these beings may be, and I just haven't figured it out quite yet. But they're all behind me, so I don't see them. I just feel their presence. And in front of me is this floating scroll, and it's old parchment, and it's unfolded, and script is starting to be written on it. And it's beautiful gold, sparkly letters. And as it unfolds, I get this thought that definitely stems from my ego, which had been gone, that, you're showing this to a human. And just like that, the script went away, the scroll rolled up, and I was back in my human body, back on Earth, and I felt my heart start again. And that is still beyond words. Very, very weird feeling.
You had such a unique experience when you went through all this, and so I have so many questions on it. Starting with the tunnel and then some of the numbers, that's really interesting that numbers played such a big role in your near-death experience. Why do you think that is? What was that all about?
Yeah, so I've been trying to figure that out as well. It's almost 7 years later, and I liked math, but I wasn't ever into coding or software engineering or mathematics for a career. So I've been curious because I've heard other near-death experiences since then that oftentimes their NDE will reflect certain passions of their life. And I would never say binary code was a thought in my life. So why it was so significant to me is still a question of mine. However, since then, the binary code has come into play in several of my meditations when I get back into the quantum and have proceeded to rewire a misfunctional brain. So I'm not sure what the overall meaning of the numbers that played a role in my experience were, but they still play out in my human life.
Do you think the numbers are part of creation and that's what we're built on?
Absolutely. Especially when I was in the place with the Ascended Master, and I just knew that the universe was created in math, and I threw up the numbers. That was a knowledge I was downloaded in with. And when you think about it and you see all of the beautiful creations like the pine cones and flowers and cacti and pineapples, I mean, the Fibonacci sequence is just about everywhere, and that's math. And math is also a tool to understand the universe. So absolutely everything is linked back to math. And personally, I think that's, the big scheme of things and why I saw all the math. But, whether that resonates with other people or not, I'm not sure. But for me, absolutely everything is math. And it's really exciting to know their equations.
When you were in the tunnel, did you say that you were gaining knowledge at that point?
Yes. So not only was I going through the tunnel that the code was all around me, but I was also being downloaded with code at the same time.
And do you know what that code meant?
Part of that code has come back to me, and it has actually rewired at least the symbolism of rewiring my myoclonic dystonic brain, which is the chronic condition I mentioned earlier. So it was a code that my brain needed to heal. That was just one tiny part of the information that came through. And I'm sure there will be more that come as I continue this human experience.
And so did you heal then with that code?
Yes. So that was 6 years after my experience, I had temporary remission of my symptoms. And I'm talking daily, almost minutely symptomology. Obviously, it would increase or decrease throughout the day, but it was a daily phenomenon for me. And I was in remission, but I didn't really think about it because I was so overwhelmed with coming back to this space and trying to figure out what the heck had just happened, what this life was, where I was. I was in a whole different type of survival mode, so I didn't put much stock into it. So I went back into my old identity and my old thoughts, my old feelings, my old career, my old life, and what lived in my old life, my old condition. So the condition had recreated itself. Then I actually finally was able to try a treatment very experimental for the condition, and that would be deep brain stimulation surgery. And it's brain surgery. Well, that also gave me quite a bit of relief and helped get me out of survival mode. And, I really wasn't intending to heal the condition. I finally had a treatment that was pretty successful. But when I wanted to work on other parts of myself, I ended up learning more about meditation and getting back into the quantum, which I now believe is where I went the first part of my experience, that darkness, that pure energy. That's the same place I get back to in meditation. And in one of these meditations, I saw the code come and start rewiring my brain. And I just knew that it was healing this myoclonus dystonia condition and that I didn't even need the brain stimulator I had fought almost 12 years to get. And it was just like, once again, the universe and the afterlife and everything has a funny sense of humor. So I fought 12 years to get this experimental treatment, brain surgery. And in less than 2 years, I was healing in the quantum. I was healing myself in the quantum. Just kind of funny and ironic, but that code from my tunnel came into play in that meditation.
And yet you could have attracted that into your life, because you were meditating and finding this code, you might have attracted that surgery to you.
Well, I hadn't started meditating at that point. So
Okay.
The surgery, I had gone full back into my old life. So I was working in construction. I, was still trying to be independent. I lost my independence because of the condition coming back so violently and angrily, it felt like. And so I did end up getting surgery, but it wasn't until a year and a half after surgery did I start learning about this type of meditation. I had done mindfulness meditation before, but I've since learned that is a very different type of meditation. It brings you fully into the physical senses, where this other type of meditations takes you fully out of it and out of your body and into nothing and nowhere. And only in nothing and nowhere does everything and all possibilities exist.
Now that's intriguing. So how do the rest of us learn to do that type of meditation?
Yeah, I love that question. So there are tons of different ways of achieving this. And there are different cultures and even some philosophies that teach you how to do this, and even some scientists. So the way I've learned was through Dr. Joe Dispenza, where he just gave me the language that made sense to me to be able to let go and get back into that nothingness. He even in his meditations, he talks about the nothingness. And after learning about him and his process, it was the language that made sense to me because I'd been there. I'd been to this nowhere, this nothingness, this darkness that is actually full of everything. So it made sense to me as a near-deather who had been in this void. But there are other great teachers. I think a lot of Indian practitioners, and I mean Indian practitioners, that also help teach you to let go of the thoughts in your mind and help you go into nowhere, nothing, darkness. There's also breath work that helps some people get there. Some of my best meditations are right after, 5-10 minutes of heavy, like awesome breath work that just helps me just zap out of my body, zap out of my 3D senses. So there are many, many different avenues of getting there. There's not just one right one. There have been teachers throughout history that teach how to get there. You just have to find what language works for you.
But basically, it sounds like you're just sort of erasing everything and going kind of that nowhere space. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say erasing, but I think it's more of letting go.
Letting go. Okay.
Our ego is here to protect us, and if you're on the lower vibrational energies, and your spirit leaves, it's not going to go necessarily in the right place. I've had instances of astral travels when I was younger that were involuntarily when I had low vibrational energy, and I ended up in places that were not good, that were of lower vibrations, and I met dark entities in those places. So our ego and our attachment is there to protect us. But when you have high vibrational energies, when you come at it with a heart of gratitude and love and joy instead of need and anxiety and fear, then your vibrations are elevated. And then you just let go. It's not necessarily erasing or, it's not like you can't have a thought. You just acknowledge that thought and let it disappear into the darkness. And sometimes I even find myself as a consciousness, little beam of light, and I see how far into the darkness I can chase it. And that just helps me get deeper into the darkness and further away from my body and my senses, if that makes sense.
It does. And you mentioned dark entities, and I think that's something that scares a lot of people. Is that something we need to be afraid of, or is it really something that, we're able to protect ourselves from? And, what are they all about?
Yeah, I would love to share. A lot of people, say either they don't exist or you should be afraid of them. But if you're afraid of them, they feed on that. That draws them towards them. So fear is a very powerful emotion. That is why you see it in history. A lot of rulers and dictators use fear as way of power and control. It is a very powerful emotion. However, it is powerful in the negative way, and it draws these dark beings to you. They feed off you, and they like to stick around, causing even more fear, and it's a circle. I actually dealt with dark entities for 16 years leading up to my near-death experience. And I was fearful. I had no help or resources. I didn't know about the metaphysical world. I didn't know how to protect myself. My church said that doesn't exist. If you're saved and you believe in Jesus Christ, they can't touch you. And that was not the case. So I implore you to try to stay away from fear. There are many, many ways to actually protect yourself. And some of those ways is, one, having that higher elevated emotions. And of course, we're human and we get sad, we get angry, we get fearful. The trick is to not stay in those emotions. So even through my chronic illness, I would have huge times of depression, anger, hopelessness, but I would try to pull myself out of it. And that also helps build resilience. And resilience helps keep these things away too, because resilience is an elevated emotion. It is control of yourself. It is a power within you. So the higher your vibrations and your emotions, the more protection you have. So that's why when you're in these elevated states and go into meditation, you don't encounter these nasty beings.
That is such an interesting concept about building resilience. I'd never really thought about it that way when people are stuck in depression, and using it as a tool to kind of train yourself to be resilient and get better at it each time you do it. Very fascinating. Bree, I have so many more questions, and there's so many more details to your near-death experience, and I can't believe how quickly this time has flown. Let's go ahead and take the rest of that into part 2.
Sounds awesome.
Thanks so much for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. That was part 1. Make sure to listen to part 2. And if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more episodes.